Well, hello everyone. It is that Weems guy here for an episode. I know we've been gone for a couple of weeks, but sorry it couldn't be helped. We are back here tonight recording, and Seth will be joining here in just a second here. And it's probably good because we've actually been talking for about 30 minutes and finally said, you know what, we should probably actually start an episode. We've been
Yeah.
having too much fun. Seth, introduce yourself, please.
Seth Thompson. I'm technically an old retired cop now. I'm still just a reserve at my old agency. Started in police work back in 1995 as a city reserve, and since then I've done a bunch of different jobs: deputy sheriff, park ranger, correctional officer. Um, I'm currently a firearms instructor with a large state academy, and that's kind of my part-time retired guy job right now. I'm also doing a little bit of writing on the side, so.
Yeah, Seth and I met at a Rangemaster Instructor Development course in Sturgis, South Dakota. E- Gosh, how many years ago has that been, Seth? 2018, 2019?
It might have even been before that. It might have been like 16 or 17.
Somewhere around
I'd
in
have to
there.
look on my CV there and see what I have. So
And Seth's boss was in that class and was part of it. And he and I happened to run into each other at a conference here a few weeks ago. It's the first time we've seen each other since then. I'm walking through the lobby at the hotel and he sees me. He and I won't say his name because I don't know if he wants it said. And, you? And so yeah, so we sat there and had a good talk for a little while. I said, "You interview one of my guys on your show." It's like, okay, so Seth won't be in trouble for being on the show then. And
nope, not this time anyway.
yeah, not this time. Well, it depends on what we say tonight.
That's right. The
Yeah.
possibilities are limitless. Both good and
Yes.
bad.
Yeah, because we are being thoroughly unsupervised at this point, so there's no telling what we might
True
say.
story.
Sure. All right. We've got a topic that Seth suggested that we'll get into in a moment, but we're going to start off with what I did this morning. Um, Today is Sunday, the 18th. Uh, I shot prior to this morning my last Glock GSSF match in May of 2013. And I have not shot a Glock match since then, prior to this morning. I took my first open enrollment class with Tom Givens, and that was my first open enrollment class ever in April of 2014. So, it was almost a year after I shot that most previous, Glock match till I took that first open enrollment class. So everything that I have done in the open enrollment world that anybody that listens to this show or whatever knows me from has all been since I quit doing competitive shooting. Everything prior to April of 2014 was government sector training. Now I got into the Glock matches and I got into IDPA a little bit and we did it pretty hard and heavy from like 2009 up to about 2013. And then occasionally we'd go back and dabble with an IDPA match or two. With the Glock matches, when I first started shooting, there were three major outdoor ones within an hour and a half of my house, including the big gunny challenge that would have like 1,000 entries in a weekend. Was within an hour and a half of me. Um, Two of those three matches no longer exist at those ranges. Um, and then the one that's still close to me for several years was on the same weekend as TACCon, and I couldn't do TACCon and the Glock match. There was another match that was about an hour and a half for me, and it has ceased to exist. Everything. So basically, like when I was shooting it, I had this conglomeration of matches, and all of a sudden they were all gone. Um, I shot in the amateur and guardian divisions way back then. Two of the 4 years that I shot Glock matches, I won enough in prize money that I had to pay income taxes on. I
Nice.
will I will say that the random gifts, random awards were very good to me, and because I won two pistols in random drawings, and I won three pistols as performance awards, and then I had a string of second place finishes, so my matches were paid for because you win like $100 if you're the second place finisher. And so I was basically going to shoot the matches for free.
Hmm.
Um, but I'll say that my personal best back then was a 63. And it's one of those time plus matches where the lower your time wins.
Mhm.
Um, I was always had the goal of I wanted to break 60. I was on path to do that one time in a match and completely fell apart. I was just all of a sudden splitting headache hits me. Wound up in the hospital the next day
Oop.
for 3 days and was on my flat on my back for several weeks. Um, and it was always kind of this nagging thing that I never, I never broke that 60-second mark, and that was
Mhm.
always my goal. And so there was one about a couple of, about 2 hours from me this weekend. I said, you know what, I'm going to go. Um, I've always had this thing nagging at me. I want to beat it, and I said, but now there's a lot of water under my bridge since then. And now I'm shooting an optic gun instead of an iron sight gun. So I'm going to hold myself accountable. I want to hit 45. I want to break the 45-second mark. And in one of the divisions, 45-0-0. And then the other one was like 45, 30 something. So like it
Uh-huh.
averaged to 45.3 across everything that I shot. So I'm
So
pretty
close.
pretty happy with my baseline there. Um, previously, like I said, 63, and I dropped that all the way down to a 45. Now, some of that I'm going to credit to technological advance of the sighting system, but a lot of it, just the water that's been under the bridge since then.
Mhm.
Um,
Do you shoot the same way you did back then?
Kind of, sort of,
Okay.
kind of, sort of. One thing, I'm much more consistent now than I was then. I am not as fast now as I was then. One of the things that has afflicted me of late, um, I've lost my internal clock. I
Okay.
used to could like draw and shoot a course of fire, a string of fire, holster up and tell you what my time was. And then the timer guy would say it.
Mhm.
And I've lost that. Um, so I needed to get back into that to that level. I'm not really worried about the speed. And the one thing I always like about the Glock matches is I always view them as I'm competing against myself.
Mhm.
The courses are pretty much the same. There's some variations from range to range and setups, but it's basically the same match every time you go. And so I always go and I just compete against um, my average and my personal best.
Mhm.
And can I beat my average? Can I set a new personal best? And I really don't care where I finish in the standings. Um, Looks like I finished in the MLS division today, 11th out of 106 shooters.
Not bad for, being away for it for that long.
Yeah. It's I found out shooting Glock all those years ago that I'm a 19 guy. I swapped the same trigger group from a 34 to a 17 to a 19, shot several
Mhm.
matches, and I was beating everything with the 19. I don't currently have a 19 with optics on it.
Hmm.
I will probably get a 19 with Decoa. I just haven't found one available yet. And so I shot a 45 with an acro. I prefer the shorter grip. I tend to heel the longer grips a little bit when
Mhm.
I'm really pushing hard for speed. Excuse me. And when I'm really pushing hard for speed, and a couple of my penalty points, like on one string, oh, you got the Glock M, you got the 5 to Glock, and you got the plates. On
Mhm.
one of those, I had like one shot out of all the strings that was high, and sure enough, I pushed it trying to push for the speed.
Mhm.
On the plates on one of my string, I had to make up a plate. I shot right over the top of it, pushing for speed. And same. I think I had two plates that I had to make up, and that adds a half to three-quarters of a second time right there. On the
Mhm.
paper, if you push one out of the A zone, for lack of a better word, it adds a second. If you push it out of that, then it adds 3 seconds. I didn't have anything in a 3 point uh, penalty stage this time. Um, was very pleased with it. Very pleased for having not shot the matches in for so long.
Mhm.
Um, I am curious. I want to go shoot another one now with a 19 with
Ah.
optics. While I love the acro for a duty optic because I like the mounting system, I prefer the clamp to the screws going through the top,
Mhm.
and I like the enclosed emitter versus an open. Uh, I do think that competitively, you're better off with something like an SRO.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
and I know that was their target audience with those, with a
yeah,
nice big generous window for
hmm
competitive use.
yeah. So I'm thinking, the 19 with the koa, I like the sight picture that I get with that a little bit. There's less visual clutter in front of you. So maybe if the randoms are good to me this time, and I get one of those, I'll do something and do a 19 koa or get a 19 OS and put an SRO on it or something, and venture forth again. There's a couple, like there's one in Talladega, Alabama. There'll be a couple of hours for me, um, and so I may do that. That's where the gunny challenge is now. It used to be here. Um, just really curious to see. All right, now I've established that baseline at 45 seconds.
Mhm.
All right, now can I do something and push, and beat that?
Yeah, where
And
can you go from here with some concerted effort?
yeah, um,
The reason I asked if you shoot differently than you did all those years
mhm,
ago, I used to shoot a fair amount of competition at some kind of unsanctioned wildcat matches in the early 2000s when I was still shooting the old-fashioned police way of the time, which
mhm,
was cross thumbs weaver, right? 1 foot
mhm,
forward, 1 foot back.
yeah,
Wasn't in competition for a long time, and I was so back then.
yeah,
Fast forward to the teens, about 2014, 2015, I started shooting some USPSA locally. And by that time, I had been through the FLETC traveling roadshow with survival speed shooting,
mhm,
and I had changed over to thumbs forward
yeah,
isosceles, different manipulations,
mhm,
and was doing way better
yeah,
than I did in the old days. And I'm not saying that isosceles or Weaver are better, but I think the system of being taught, a better
yeah.
set of manipulations of the gun and then being more consistent with it paid off. I saw dividends just between those two time frames in my own experience.
Now that you mention, I've been a thumbs forward isosceles kind of guy the whole time. However, I came through the academy in the tactical turtle age,
Mhm.
and I will say that back when I was shooting all those matches, I was doing the turtle thing, and I'm not doing that now. But I'm still a thumbs forward guy. Um, Kind of curious. This week, I'm going to a class that is based on the Rogers shooting school system.
Mm.
It's not the same target array as Rogers, but it's
Right.
the same thing. It's got his blessing to use to say it's a Rogers range and everything. It's an easier target array. Um, and I would love to be able to go shoot a Glock match next weekend after
Mm.
having done that this week and
Right.
just see what those three would do. Because I got a feeling my internal clock's going to get rewired a little bit this week, or it's going to go. Oh yeah, that's what we used to be able to do. Um, I had uh, cataracts removed in both eyes last year, and I had surgery on one of my hands last year, and my hands and my eyes have not wired back together yet.
Mhm.
And I'm still getting some swelling in my support hand that impacts my support hand grip, which impacts my shooting much more than when I had the same surgery in my strong hand 2 years ago. Um, I don't have the fine focus in my eyes anymore. While I can see much more clearly than I was prior to the surgery, and I can drive at night again,
Mhm.
I don't have fine focus and I don't have the quick adjustment um, that I previously had, and that has impacted my shooting a little bit when I start trying to run the gun hard. So I'm kind of curious as this week in the Rogers based class, um, if all of a sudden my brain will remember, oh yeah, this is what we used to be able to do.
Right.
Let's do this again. Um, so we'll see. It's probably going to be late summer or fall before I get to shoot another match to kind of compare the baselines, but
Mhm.
uh, but we'll see. We'll see.
I'm looking forward to getting into competitive shooting again. Our local range that was hosting USPSA closed. It was an indoor range,
Mhm.
and our state and some other entities are putting together a big elaborate outdoor range that should be open
Yeah,
this fall. And our
yeah.
local USPSA league is already scheduling matches. So
Mhm.
as another friend of mine says, it's a humbling experience because we have the cop ego, right? And nobody wants to go
Yeah.
there and get beat by a plumber. And some plumbers shoot pretty good.
Yeah.
But
For
on
me,
the
it was the
other
printer
hand,
repairman.
yeah, or the printer repairman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly, there are a fair number of IT dudes shooting up there.
Yeah.
The guy they beat in that USPSA league was a retired fighter pilot of all things,
Mhm.
and he was shooting a single stack 1911, and he could bust people really good with that. He was
Yeah.
very good. So, um, but I'm looking forward to that once they get that up and rolling again because like you put the cop ego aside and shoot somebody else's course of fire and just see where you're at.
There's a Glock match in Valley Springs on May
Um,
31st, 32nd. And
Valley
I guess it'll be
Springs.
June 1st. Not May 32nd, June 1st.
Okay,
Um, I don't know how close that is to you, but
that sounds very far away.
yeah, yeah. Uh,
It's the whole East River West River thing, right? So
yeah,
let's see here. I would say
yeah,
that's probably, but yeah,
yeah, yeah. The Glock matches I really like those. I like the format. Um, what I really like about them is, all right, the best shooter's gonna win, but an average shooter's got a fighting chance
hmm
because the course of fire is actually so short. You got 3 stages, and there's not a lot of separation from top to bottom, so to
hmm
speak, percentage wise. Um, and so you can get a lot of, the same top 10 guys are going to be the same top 10 guys, but there can be a lot of flip and very, just pull one shot on one stage,
right.
and it can flip the whole thing over. Um, SIG has actually started an event that is very GSSF esque, and they're calling it Shoot SIG.
Okay,
There's not one close to me, um, but I'm very interested in going to shoot that. It's a very similar format. Um, they're shooting, they're using practice score, and you actually sign up for your time that you're going to show up and shoot versus having to stand around and sign in and finagle and try to get up there and shoot your stuff. That you actually use your squad time as your time to show up to shoot. And I kind of
uh-huh.
like that idea. And but it's very similar to GSSF, and it's a 3 stage match. It's going to be the same thing at every match and everything. And it's a good entry level thing. Um, I miss
Prac-
shooting the matches, but I don't want to get into doing it every weekend again.
right,
Um, I have no interest whatsoever in USPSA, and I don't want to get in the run and gun stuff. IDPA is probably as run and gun as I'm going to get.
right.
And I tried when I started trying to learn the dot, went back to a couple of IDPA matches, and I found myself just bored to tears. Yeah, standing around pasting for 20 minutes to get your turn to shoot 20 seconds.
Yeah, that can be a problem. Um, the I don't know. Our local matches did use practice score for the USPSA matches.
Yeah,
And that was kind of nice because
yeah,
depending on who was scoring it, sometimes you'd see your results that night.
yeah.
Within an hour
Um,
or two, which was
now, Glock,
kind of nice feedback.
yeah, it used to be several days before you would see it with Glock sometimes.
hmm
And when I got home, I logged in and they already had scores up on the board. I'm like, oh
Yeah,
wow. And so I finished, like I say, 11th out of 106 in the MLS division, and I was 14th out of 60 something in the unlimited division. But I shot a stop 45 in the unlimited
yeah.
because those are the only two that you can shoot optics in, and so that's what I did. And yeah, it's just for fun. I'm competing against me. I'm not worried about where I do in the field. Um,
And that was always my objective with USPSA was that
yeah,
if I finished in the top third to the top half of
hmm
any given division, I was pretty happy. Uh,
yeah,
and there's one shooter in particular that if he didn't show up that night,
hmm
there was a good chance I might win like carry optics or something like that.
yeah,
The guy in questions is an old friend of mine from the
yeah.
business, and I have no qualms admitting he's a way better shooter than I am.
Right.
So, but if he didn't show up, sometimes I would actually win it, which was kind of funny. So,
Yeah, what I would love to see would be some sort of match akin to what GSSF does, akin to what this Shoot Sig does, that's brand agnostic.
Hmm.
And I guess the closest thing you're going to get to that is Steel Challenge.
Right.
But I would love to see something along those lines. Um, and in the SIG ones, you can actually show up and shoot in the other category and shoot whatever you want.
Oh,
You're just not eligible for any of the prizes.
right.
So if you wanted to go test yourself, on the course of fire, you got to do that.
The Wildcat matches that I shot back in the early 2000s that I mentioned,
Hmm.
it was kind of that sort of thing where it was a local gun club running it and it was
Hmm.
totally unsanctioned.
Yeah.
But the fun part about it was every Sunday they would do a different sort of discipline.
Hmm.
So one Sunday was steel challenge, one Sunday was bowling pins, one Sunday was IDPA ish,
Hmm.
one was USPA ish. They had different guys in the club that were interested in those different disciplines, so they'd each
Yeah.
kind of run it, and it was fun. It was kind of a
Yeah.
fun mix them up thing. Like I said, totally unsanctioned, of course, but
Yeah. Yeah. I used to shoot in a local, just completely unsanctioned league, and basically your classification was based on your three most recent scores,
mhm,
and that's what they would put you in. They have four different classifications, and but there wasn't any like divisions. And so
mhm,
you may have somebody show up with a full-on tricked out open gun that's shooting against you and
right,
your production Glock 19.
right,
Um, we derisively started calling it the dirt track,
mhm,
because the rules would change in the middle of the match to benefit a certain select group of shooters. And so finally it got to where there was a group of guys that I would squad up with, and we would make sure we got squatted together and we didn't even look at what the rest of the results were. We just competed
mhm,
against ourselves, and that was fun.
mhm.
It was worth going to just to hang out with those guys for Saturday morning.
Oh yeah,
And
and I know that there are some people that take this stuff super seriously.
mhm,
Um, Most of the places that I've stuck with any kind of competitive shooting, it was due to the atmosphere of the other shooters.
yeah,
They'd have
yeah,
a culture of, kind of supporting everybody and joshing with you a little bit.
hmm,
But at the end of the day, everybody's there to have some fun
yeah,
and test themselves out. And, um, the that old Wildcat League, they didn't have any sort of divisions as far as like what you brought for guns on a lot of the
yeah,
things like bowling pins.
hmm,
And I'm not saying I was a super good bowling pin guy, but
right,
every once in a while I'd win it. And
yeah,
if you won a match with a stock 44 special Smith and Wesson 624 revolver against a guy who had a fancy performance center gun that he spent a bunch of money on, loaded his own ammo, etc., it used to
hmm.
make that guy mad as heck, right? And
Yeah,
you know what they say about blind hogs and acorns. I'm not saying I was that great a shooter, but every once in a while, it would work out right, and my pins would go off the table before his, and boy, was
yeah,
he mad.
yeah, yeah. That's always fun. Yeah, yeah. I remember showing up to a low light carbine class, and there's all these, as you say, IT guys and everything else out there, and these tricked out guns, thousands of dollars, lasers,
Mhm,
all this kind of stuff. And I'm out there with an iron sighted Colt 6933
mhm,
and everything. And finally, one of those guys who's like standing next to him, he had to have 3 or 4 grand in his setup.
mhm.
And so I was like, so what do you do? And he's, oh, I'm an IT guy. And I was just, he said, so what do you do? And I said, this. It's, this is what I do for a living. I'm just trying to get better at it. And yeah, it is what it is. But I'll say this to the back when I shot out EPA, there was a group of us that we would go and we would always squad out with each other. And I went to the matches for the merciless harassing that took place in our squad.
Uh-huh.
It was awful. There would be some times where like some guys would like, yeah, I want to come over to those guys. They have fun, and some others like, I ain't shooting with those guys. They're vicious. And like we'd have a peanut gallery going, doing cat calls on somebody as they're shooting and everything else. And
Hmm.
it was fun. That was why I went. When that group kind of faded away, and I came back and tried to shoot a few matches a few years ago, and they weren't there. It was just, oh, it was awful. It was just
Hmm.
so boring, so boring. And I'm sure if I kept going to the matches, I'd find a new group to hang out with. But it's just not the same. Not the same.
It helps to have a good bunch of people there and a good
Yeah.
culture. Some
Mhm.
people are entirely too serious about this stuff.
Yeah.
They're
It
trying to
is.
they're trying to be the next Max Michelle or whoever,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay.
And likewise, for those of us that train primarily for the application side of the thing, it is perfectly acceptable to have and shoot a gun just for the pure enjoyment of having and shooting the gun.
True story.
That is perfect. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Not at all.
Yeah.
And if anybody is still listening at this point, if they stuck around through all this, Seth, tell them what we're going to talk about tonight.
Um,
And
I
while you
brought
do
up
that, I'm
a
going to yell at the beagle. She's in the trash. Go right ahead.
fair enough. I brought up a subject in the Facebook group about the difference between basic and advanced training when it comes to firearms, and the fact that some instructors and even some organizations kind of conflate the two. And I don't know that there's a hard dividing line, but there are often people that look down on basic training,
Mm-hmm.
not understanding that a lot of what we look at as gunfighting skills are, they need that basic foundation, but some of them really aren't that advanced. They're just the basics done really well. And I don't know that some people understand the context behind that. So, recently, I've seen some things on Facebook where people have been deriding different state qualification standards, and we can delve into that whole side endlessly. I'm sure we've all got horror stories one way or the other, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to ask yourself what the context is. Are they standards for basic people in basic
Mm-hmm.
classes that are just getting started? Is it a baseline, or is it for people that have
Right.
heavy assignments in SWAT and heavy assignments in this unit or that unit? And I think folks conflate those sometimes. So, but that was what I wanted to talk about kind of a little bit.
So, what is the dividing line between a basic and an advanced class?
It's a good question.
Because I don't know the answer.
I don't either. We could say, hey, everything after X number of weeks in a say a police academy, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore you've graduated from a basic class, right?
Right.
So, in fact,
Yeah.
some of them are actually titled law enforcement basic.
Yeah.
Okay, everything after that is advanced, right?
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
yeah. Here in Georgia, that was the thing. You had your basic mandate training, and then anything after that was called advanced training or an in
Hmm.
service. Um, we just dramatically expanded the curriculum of the basic academy, and some classes that were previously advanced were just picked up, moved over, and dropped into basic. So are they not advanced material anymore? Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. Um, yeah, strictly speaking on the firearms, I don't know what the difference between basic and advanced is. I love Spalding's terminology of you have the essentials,
Hmm.
and then after that, you're just adding combative application on top of the essentials.
Hmm.
Um, I tend to look at it as here's the things you got to be able to do, and then we're just going to add layers to that.
Hmm.
But I don't title anything basic or advanced in my course when I'm picking a course name or whatever.
Right. I think it was, and if I'm misquoting this, I remember I think it was the late Louis Arbuck that said he had never been in an advanced gunfight.
Right,
He wasn't sure what one of those looked like.
right.
All he had been in were basic ones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe there's something to that, in that,
Right,
what exactly are we training for? the average police officer, like, what are our firearms objectives with them?
Hmm.
Okay, are we training them to execute high risk warrant services or hostage rescues, as an example? Probably not.
No.
Not in a basic academy.
Hmm.
Are we training them to safely handle firearms around other people and themselves? Yeah. Are we training them to execute basic marksmanship tasks and basic gun handling? Yeah, we are.
Kinda,
Yeah, trying to.
kinda.
Yeah. Like I said, I think the trouble comes sometimes when people get the two of them confused, because that's, again, in a basic situation, we're probably not going to be teaching, you know, movie style tactics,
Right.
so
Yeah. It's all right. We're going to take you out here. We're going to stand you in this particular spot, and then don't you move.
hmm,
When we tell you to, you load your pistol because you can't have it loaded and move around out here. My gosh, we can't have that. Although as soon as you graduate, that's what you're going to
right,
do. Um, Everybody's going to load to the exact same round count so that everybody runs dry at the end of what we're doing. So they'll holster an empty pistol. Yeah. And when we tell you to, you draw and you shoot that target right there and maybe the one next to it in this amount of time, whatever it is. And then we call those people qualified.
yes,
And then we wonder why they go out into the field and the national hit rate is well below 20%, depending on
hmm
those numbers you're looking at. Um, yeah, it just there's no wonder why it people talk about security theater. I guess it's some extent, is it training theater? I don't
right,
know. We're both liable to get ourselves in a lot of trouble here tonight. We
right,
stay on that tactic.
right.
Um, the shooting problems of a typical gunfight, be it either a cop gunfight or a private citizen in the parking lot or in their home gunfight, the shooting problems aren't typically that hard.
They're pretty basic.
They're there's just not a lot of challenge as far as the shooting with, because if you could take them and take break down an incident, take the shots fired, the distances fired, and then the time frame was where they were fired. Now, if I were to take you out there to the range and say, "All right, Seth, here's your course of fire based on this incident. All right, ready? Beep." You're probably going to burn it down.
Right.
The difference is doing it in real time, having to process all the information. And
And
your start signal is your buddy just got shot or somebody
yep,
just punched you in the face.
yep, and so much of, I think sometimes people miss the context that so much of what's important about police shooting isn't how
Mm-hmm.
well you shoot, but whether or not to shoot, whether or not to keep shooting,
Mm-hmm.
and so on and so forth. Those things get people more in trouble than they're shooting.
Yeah.
I've got a little sort of a hobby study I've been doing of shootings in our state since 2000. I have a pretty good spreadsheet of them now with, technical details that I can find
Mm-hmm.
open source, on the internet and
Yeah.
and I've even spoken to some of the officers in person about it. And the interesting thing is, in our little slice of the world, whatever we're teaching them, we're not doing that bad. By and large, they are winning armed confrontations with bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like you say, a lot of the times and distances and things are not particularly difficult.
Right.
But again, the question is, you know, deciding quick enough, does someone need to be shot? Do you need to
Mm-hmm.
keep shooting them? Um, and I don't know, there was some talk on the internet recently about, cops should be able to shoot XYZ split times or things like that. That was brought up again, and I know that's a subject near and dear to your heart. Uh, and again, like we've said before, assessment speed is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, I don't know. Like I said, going back to Louis Arbuck's comment about the basic gunfight and the advanced gunfight, a lot of these gunfights are pretty basic.
Yeah.
So It's that's the question is, are we training for the basic gunfight or the advanced one?
I don't know if you can hear it, if the audience can hear it or not. There's a very angry beagle
No, I'm not hearing that at
in
all.
the living room that is very, very, very loud. I'm hearing it even with the earphones on. Uh,
No,
yeah. Beagles don't do anything quietly.
no.
Whatever it was, she's gotten over it now, and she's gotten quiet. But she was paying off there for a second.
Oh my gosh.
Uh, yeah, that's a regular occurrence. Um,
Our dog's 11. He's sleeping quietly over here in the other room, so that's mostly what he does.
yeah. Um, you start looking at stuff, typical gunfights. Tom Givens is big on there's nothing average about a gunfight, but there are typical things. There's stuff
Hmm.
that commonalities and the like. When our training is we're doing unrealistic time limits on the slow end versus on the fast end,
Hmm.
and we're giving exorbitant uh, target areas, and then we're accepting complete misses
Hmm.
so long as you get 80% of the total allowable points somehow. I think that's a problem. There's a big hullabaloo in my state right now, and um, the body that is in charge of setting the standards, which is not my organization, the body that's in charge of setting the standards for the first time ever this year, instead of setting like a this is the state course, they said this are the minimums. You got to have these in your course, but these are minimums. Now,
Hmm.
I looked at it as, oh, this is a challenge now because now I can take these things and I can design some really, really, really fun courses as long as I've got all this in there. Excuse me. Now, unfortunately, everybody's regressing to the minimums. Seth, based on the standards that the state's established, you don't have to get a hit beyond 7 yards if you get all 10-point hits at 3 and 7.
Wow.
You can shoot the rest of them you could not shoot the rest of them and still get your 80% and qualify.
Right.
Um, and so there's been a lot of angry uh, pushback from organizations,
Hmm.
firearms instructors, everything else. Um, I personally don't have a problem with the minimums if we were to go to 100% accountability.
Hmm.
All right, you put one shot in the green, which is the area outside of our scoring areas. You
Right.
put one shot in the green, it's a DQ. We can't
And
accept that.
and many of our instructor courses have that same standard.
Yeah,
Many of the ones I've been to, NRA and, many
yeah,
others, if you yeah, if you don't hit the guy, you're done.
yeah, yeah.
And as I've told people in the past off and on firing ranges where, technically it counted, but it was still off the
Mhm.
silhouette, they'd
Yeah,
be like, "Well, yeah, it doesn't count." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I mean, it landed in the schoolyard down the street, but other than
yeah,
that,
yeah,
it doesn't count for scoring." And they're kind of
yeah,
like, and they're, trying to figure out if I'm serious, and I am
yeah,
serious. I mean,
yeah,
that's a round they have to account for in some
yeah.
way, but
Oh, I walk up when I go to score a target, and if there's a shot out in the green, I write a name by it, and then I make up a story about that name.
okay.
This was little Billy. Little Billy, he was playing in his front yard when that round that you just missed this guy with just sailed down the street and it killed little Billy. And little Billy was going to grow up and cure Alzheimer's disease. And I'll have like this whole
Lay it
thing
on thick
going
there.
on. And, like down the line, I'll get to one and it's like, this is Seth. And Seth's little brother is now asking his mommy every day, where's Seth? Why isn't Seth coming home?
Hmm.
Trying to give them some emotional context
Right.
for, well, I still shot a 240 is 80%. Well, I shot my 242. I'm qualified. Okay, but what about all those rounds that you just sent
Wherever, yeah, the
wherever?
schoolyard down the street,
Yeah,
and that's I mean, what's the old cliche that they used to tell us old time cops? They say every bullet you shoot has a lawyer attached to it.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
there's some validity to that.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Um,
may be liable for those.
yeah. So I pulled out a pieces of the individual course of fire and had students shoot it as a time plus scoring.
Hmm.
And what the rules are that if you put one in the green, you're DQ'd.
Hmm.
And the feedback was phenomenal. We may keep doing that. They really like that. Um, I had students shoot head to head drills or knockout drills, and
Hmm.
it's like if you're the last one to shoot, you're out. If you miss, you're out. Type deal,
Right.
whatever. And one of my students that was shot 2 300s on the qual course got knocked out almost immediately in a head to head drill.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, when you don't have 2 seconds a shot, yeah, it kind of speeds things up, doesn't it?
Hmm.
And trying to put some sort of context again into what we're trying to do and what we're training for. Um, I'll pull like there's always some skinny beanpole guy in the class, and I'll have them come up and I'll have them stand, like shoulder to shoulder with this qualification target, and then I have them turn perpendicular to it. It's like, look how much of the A zone is outside of this guy now.
Right.
Yeah, and so if you were perpendicular to him and he's shooting at you, or he's about to kill your partner or whatever, and you can't run around and get in front of him and shoot the width of his body, you got to shoot the narrow portion of his body.
Right.
Can you make that shot?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I know in our academy we do a pretty extensive use
Mhm.
of skip loading at the beginning, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
Larry Mudgett's techniques.
yeah,
And the target they're shooting at with that is a B8
hmm,
at 15 yards.
yeah,
And you know what? Uh, it's an acceptable accuracy standard. People can
yeah,
make it work.
yeah,
So, and I like the fact that we kind of start off shooting at a smaller hit zone
hmm,
as the conditioning thing, where it's like, hey,
right,
that circle up in the upper chest, that's where you should be endeavoring to land your shots,
right,
regardless of what the state qual thing
hmm,
is, which is 4 or 5 or 6 times bigger.
right,
It's a B-21E hit zone, so by
hmm,
statute or by ARSD, um, so that's always a positive thing that I like, where we start people off to start visualizing that as the area that they need to
yeah,
be shooting at. And that's the
yeah,
kind of the acceptable hit standard
yeah,
hit zones. And psychologically, you still have people that get flummoxed with distance shooting, but some folks, when it's put into context, when you go to the qualifications and things and say,
hmm,
what distance have you been shooting at almost every day? Well, 15 yards. And you've been shooting in how small a circle? Well, a thing this small. Right. So now you can do that and you have plenty of time to do it. Oh, okay. And some folks that clicks for them.
hmm,
They say, well, I'm just going to go back to the things I was doing, which, is pressing the trigger correctly and aligning the sights correctly. And guess
yeah,
what? It works.
yeah,
So
yep,
we had um, an agency a number of years ago that had a really crazy big hit zone on their targets that they
hmm,
used. They used the B-27, if you're familiar with that one,
yeah, yeah,
with scoring rings in it.
wow,
Yeah, and the
yeah,
problem was the scoring rings taught you to shoot somewhere down by about the kidney or the stomach.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
Shoot them in the
thankfully,
diaphragm instead of up in the
yeah, and
yeah.
generations of guys trained on this big, laughably big target, shooting at the wrong
Hmm.
place on
Yeah,
the person, and um, thankfully we kind of standardized it all now.
yeah,
You could put any target up you want as long as it has the standardized, the B-21
hmm,
East hit zone.
yeah,
So, and like that's the minimum standard,
hmm,
and there's nothing to say that you can't have people shoot smaller than that,
right,
as they say. So,
yeah. I made a little target just in Publisher. That's a 5.5 inch circle, which is the same size as the black on a B8 bullseye. Inside
Mhm.
of that, I have a 3x5 rectangle, and inside of that, I have a 3x3 square. And
Mm.
everybody calls it the cell phone target because it looks like a an old iPhone 5,
Uh-huh.
sitting there. Um, but I'll just go stick that up on the A zone of the other target. So anything outside of this circle we're going to consider that a miss.
Mhm.
In some training drills and everything. It's like, but when I shoot my demos, I endeavor to put everything in the 3x3,
Right.
even though I could push a little harder and still be inside the 5.5 inch circle.
Let
I
it
want to
spill out
tag
a
it in
little
the
bit.
3x3. And then subconsciously, the students start trying to do that. I'm trying to draw them into, let's put all these shots in this area. Yeah, I'm going to step on some toes, move a piano here and everything. That there's still that thing of, well, we need to spread the damage around.
Mm.
And
The
I
bucket
work
theory.
Yeah, some people that I dearly love still repeat that,
Mm.
and I always want to say, okay, that same spot's not going to be there when
Right.
I shoot again.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
dude's gonna spread the damage around for you.
yeah, he's going to
He's
be
he's
moving.
he yeah, he's
Yeah,
gonna be moving and shooting and waving his
yeah,
arms and running
yeah,
and doing all kinds of weird stuff.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
he'll spread the damage around for you automatically.
yeah, if I can't shoot a tight group on this thing when it's standing still, the
Mhm.
chances are being able to put shots where I need to when it's moving
Right.
are going to be lesser. And I think that's one of the things too. Is okay, say, all right, basic is we're doing this with two hands.
Mhm.
All right. We start moving up the layers. So how do we add layers to that? Okay. Well, we'll move it till you do it strong hand only. And now
Mhm.
are you doing it support hand only? Are you doing it with an unknown number of rounds in your gun? So if you got a slide lock, you have to do a reload.
Mhm.
Dummy round in there that you don't, so you don't know that it's coming. The
Mhm.
unknown malfunction drill. Um, I was teaching a contract class in Texas a couple of years ago, and just kind of came up with this on the fly on the range. Was would have the relay that was on the line. They would stand and face the target. The relay that was behind them would step up and take their magazine out of the pistol and do whatever they wanted to in the magazine, and then
Mm.
insert it back in. So the guys had no idea how many rounds they had in their guns, whether they had a dummy round in there or
Right.
whatever. And then I would point at someone and say, "Call the next course of fire."
Mhm.
And they would, two to the body, one to the head, two more to the body. All right, everybody got it? Go.
Right.
And then they had to fix their gun. Like if some of them would draw and it was two to the body, one to the head, two to the body. They had 5 rounds in the gun, it's good enough to go. Some of them have three dummy rounds in the magazine, and then it
Right.
run dry and they had to reload. So they couldn't like stand there and like cheat off their buddy's paper. And
And which is how it works. I mean,
yeah,
we know that malfunctions occur more often in real shootings.
right.
Yeah, you can't plan for that.
And that's the other thing there. It just kind of spurred me is it's not hard to get someone up to a basic level of draw the pistol, shoot that target. It seems like it takes a lot of effort to get people to have a true understanding of what's going on with their gun
Mhm.
and what to do with it. To recognize when it goes to slide lock when they weren't expecting it, that, oh, my gun's empty, I need to reload.
Mhm.
Or, oh, that was a click, I need to fix that malfunction. Rather than just standing there looking at their gun.
Right.
I think that's the difference between, if we're going to say basic and advanced,
Mhm.
a basic student and an advanced student, or a basic student and an experienced student is the one that knows what to do with their gun when it goes wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, we can teach them the rote clearance methods and things like
Hmm.
that, but until somebody has some real experience with it.
Yeah.
Though, one of the things we mitigate that with, of course, is quite a bit of,
Right.
dry drills with dummies,
Right.
on a repetitive basis. The fact that with skip loading, you're continually doing a tap and a rack
Hmm.
sequence. But
Yeah.
the interesting thing is that works for most people. But every
Hmm.
now and then, like you say, you still get that guy who or gal who is
Right.
suddenly just staring at their gun in live fire and it's not
Yeah.
working.
Yep.
And you're like, how many times have you had the stimuli of or the stimulus of pressing the trigger, getting a click,
Hmm.
and responding to it?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing, and I'm not sure why that occurs, honestly. Most of them get it, but every now and then there's the one where they're just like, uh, "It's a gun. I don't think I've ever seen this before. What do I do
Yeah,
with it?"
yeah,
So I don't know. I'm sure a neurologist could probably point me down the path for that one, but
yeah. It's amazing, and that's kind of phase like too on our end on the teaching side is we need to be able to explain those things and why we do them, like the tap of
mhm.
the magazine, which I know there's some internet stuff now trying to push that you don't have to do that, but
Oh, really?
uh, yeah.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
they haven't been on a lot of cop ranges with exposed holsters, I can tell you that. Um, and I've had it actually happen to me, the magazine get partially unseated, carrying concealed. Um, so while I may not have ever seen this happen on video, I've seen it happen at arm's length in front of me.
Yes.
Um, I
It's interesting that somebody's advocating that that's not a step that's
yeah,
important because I don't think we'll have a qualification cycle where
yeah,
someone fails to seat their magazine.
yeah,
They fail to check it with a push and a pull, and there'll be
mhm, yeah,
someone that loses their magazine somewhere. It's inevitable. And
yeah,
it's
yeah,
I mean, you could almost set your watch by it. You could say this is going to
yeah.
happen at least once today.
Yeah, well, I was teaching at the Girl and a Gun National Conference here a couple of weeks ago, and I was doing a lot of skip loading with them. And
Mhm.
each time I would tap the magazine and run the slide, and twice I taught 6 sessions. Twice I had students go, "Well, why are you tapping the magazine?" And it's one of those things that reminded me I didn't
Yeah,
explain that to them.
yeah. So I should probably demonstrate this and
Right. And so
run
then it's like,
away.
okay, well, let me explain to you why I do this and why I suggest that you do this. And it's something to the point of we don't even think about it anymore.
Mhm.
But when you get people that don't have that level of understanding of the firearm, they don't know why to do that.
And it's probably a good thing to break out of the
Yeah.
cop and training world and actually be exposed to folks like that
Oh yeah. And people
because
who are actually enthusiastic about being there.
yes,
Sorry, I
yes.
didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, no. Yeah, that's, I think it was, the late Pat Rogers that used to talk about normal Earth people,
Hmm.
versus cops and military guys.
Yeah.
Uh, it's probably good to train with folks like that once in a
Yeah.
while because they will ask questions that we kinda take for granted, and
Yeah.
we say, yeah, why are we teaching that? Why are we
Yeah.
doing this thing?"
Yeah.
So
Oh, I have to get my cup ready because I'll have to take a drink because I'm going to quote Eric Gelhaus.
oh,
Since I said his name, I got to take the drink. Yeah, he
okay.
refers to decent, normal human beings.
Yes, decent, normal human beings. That's
Yeah,
his phrase.
and it's just while we can kind of look down our nose at basic academy level training to a certain extent, it does establish a baseline.
It
I,
does.
I know that if someone has been through an academy, they'd have at least been taught the safety rules. They should know how to draw their gun out of, get their gun out of the holster in a kind of acceptable
Right.
level, all that kind of stuff. And so I can take that bunch and I can start at a different baseline with them than if I got a bunch of people that have basically not touched firearms or whatever. And while I wouldn't consider those, so like a guy that graduates the academy this coming Friday, I wouldn't necessarily consider them advanced like what you and I would consider to be advanced. Um, I could run a different class with them on Saturday than I
Mhm.
could just a group of random people that show up on Saturday.
Right. Yeah, and it's important. I mean, I don't wanna say gates or,
Hmm.
achievements, but like you say, there's a baseline,
Hmm.
and you can say, "Hey, we've passed this stage. Now, I know that I can progress on to these things with you guys."
Hmm.
Um, I think what kinda set me off on this path tonight was the fact that there was someone on Facebook that was decrying our state's qualification standards, which,
Hmm.
they test things, right? They may
Hmm.
not be the things that people want tested, but it is a
Yeah.
baseline standard.
Yeah.
And they were kind of expecting, they threw the USPSA card and said, well, USPSA shooter at any match could do better than these guys. Probably. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All the thing is, though, is that USPSA shooter doesn't always also have to perform field sobriety tests
Yeah.
or do defensive tactics or write a
Yeah.
search warrant.
Yeah.
It's a basic academy for a reason.
Hmm.
All the
Yeah.
advanced cool guy stuff
Right.
that can come later.
Right.
By with from the cool guy instructors. I feel so.
Yeah.
It's
You,
just one of those balancing acts.
yeah. If I'm standing there and all of a sudden I'm tapped on the shoulder and says, there's an unknown problem in that building right there. Over here is a group of cops, and over here, to the other side, is a group of USPSA shooters.
Hmm.
And you don't know anyone in either group. Pick three people at random to go with you. I'm going to just go pick three out of the cop side and go because I know they have been exposed to managing chaos
Yes,
and
and we're
having
not 100% sure it's a shooting problem.
right and having an unknown problem in front of them and having to deal with it. Okay. Um, if I'm told uh, in 10 seconds coming over the horizon right there is going to be a drug gang that's trying to attack you so they can steal their weapons.
Hmm.
Okay, any of you three guys over here in the USPSA
Yep.
group, each of you take a position of cover, and when they come over
Yep.
the hill, let's go to work.
Yep.
It's
And by that same token, if it were a perfect world, would I
yeah,
prefer that like every brand new cop decides that he or she is gonna sustain his basic class firearms academy
hmm
skills
yeah,
by going and competing,
hmm
in USPSA or something?
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I would be super happy if they would. But
hmm
we also know that most cops are probably going to regard it as a checkoff.
hmm
It's another check off. It's another skill, another gate that they have to cross every year.
yeah,
Um, and when I see people who are in the training business, for themselves or other people who are saying, well, they should be able to shoot this well or that well. Okay, hey, that's what you're in business for. Go for it. You
yeah,
know, the I don't know. It's a perennial debate. I don't think it's ever going to be
yeah,
settled. It comes up every now and then.
yeah,
And the but I think people need to understand that, basic is just that, it's basic. And the
yeah,
advanced stuff, can come later.
yeah,
Um, I don't know if that makes sense. We debated whether we knew where the line between basic and advanced was, and it's
right.
who knows, right?
Well, the I call them type A trainers.
Mhm.
And I would include you and I in that bunch. But the type A training bunch and everything, most of those guys have not risen to a position where they have to administratively run an agency.
True story.
There aren't many of us that got to the big chair. Uh, having been in both worlds, I can tell you that if I made up my mind that I was only going to hire blue belts that are classified as B class shooters in USPSA, I would have had an office of one deputy, maybe two.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I don't know where those people think that applicant pool is because that's just not out there. That's not realistic. And when you look at all the things that cops do, while when shooting and fighting takes place, it is a critical skill. It's kind of low on the priority of
Absolutely.
not priority is not the right word. It's kind of low on the
Occurrence.
occurrence.
Yeah,
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 it's a
yeah.
small percentage of the
Yeah,
occurrence.
yeah. The amount of times that you're going to actually put your hands on somebody in a shift,
Yeah.
probably low compared to the amount
Hmm.
of times that you're going to have to talk somebody into or out of something.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter where you work. That's kind of one of the realities of police work,
And
and shooting's the same way.
there is a vast difference between someone who is physically resisting trying to get away from you and not going into handcuffs, and someone who is actively trying to hurt you.
Hmm.
And those are two different fights,
Yes, they are.
two
Yeah,
vastly different fights.
and I like your phrase, the type A trainers, because
Hmm.
I think that's, who we're talking about. Um, Inevitably, they're people who haven't really been on the job a whole lot. Not always. Sometimes there's some 20, 30-year-old guy, 20, 30
Yeah.
year veterans that are
Yeah.
still kind of in the everybody should be an awesome shooter category.
Hmm.
But a lot of the folks that I see advocating stuff like that, they really haven't been on the job all that much. I mean, they're in the first decade or so. So, it's not that police experience guarantees these things, but maybe a long experience in police work kind of gives you a sense of balance,
Hmm.
as maybe what's important now and what's not important now. Would I love to see all cops shoot way better? Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the business I'm in. That's
Hmm.
the job I do. At the end of the day, though, I mean, again, it's basic.
Yeah.
We had talked in our earlier chat. In our context, we have people that are in agencies that employ hundreds of officers and have their own SWAT teams, have their own investigators,
Hmm.
have many firearms instructors, etc. And we also have to certify people who are the chief of police, and they are
Hmm.
also the snowplow operator and the sewer
Yeah.
plant operator, because they're the only cop in their town. And they have to shoot and perform to a certain standard also. So we have
Well,
to be able
I
to
will
train
say
them all.
this: I don't have to certify the guy that is the snowplow operator.
Okay, that's good.
That's a where you are thing versus where I don't even know if we have a
It
snowplow
certainly
operator.
is.
Yeah.
To be fair, though, a few of the
Yeah.
people from one-person departments that we've
Yeah.
trained over the years
Yeah.
have been extremely motivated people who
Hmm.
sought out their own training later and
Hmm.
wanted to do the job for all the right reasons. So
Yeah.
I can't denigrate that.
Right.
That's but it is a reality in our area
Yeah.
that we take everybody we get and we have to train them to a certain acceptable
Yeah.
standard. So.
Yeah. Um, I'll have students from an agency of 250 something sworn, but I'll also have students from an agency of 8 sworn, and half of the agencies in the class, you
Right.
know, the rookie class, and it's there's a difference in resources and everything. It's like I
Mhm.
love hearing the big city cops that want to denigrate rural area cops.
Mhm.
Okay, all right, Scooter. Let's see you do this by yourself, not on a team.
Yes.
By yourself. You don't have a helicopter. There's no Air One, and nobody's coming to help you. It's just you.
No.
It's
No, and
just
I've
you.
you know, I've heard big city cops,
Yeah.
when cops are kind of, measuring their agencies against each other,
Hmm.
we'll say, "Well, how long do you have to wait for backup?" And there are people in certain agencies that say, "Oh, I mean, I'll have, 4 or 5 minutes." Okay. Yeah, cool story, bro.
Yeah.
Uh, I there were times when I was the only person working in an area that was 1,650 square miles.
Yeah.
And if I wanted backup, my backup was going to have to receive a phone call, wake up, put on their
Yeah.
uniform, get in their car, and come to wherever I might be. And it might have been 30 minutes of driving. So,
Yeah.
the challenges are different everywhere you
Hmm.
go. And rural officers definitely have challenges too. So,
Yeah. We had a saying at my old agency that Bogart and Bishop aren't that far apart unless you're in Bogart and your backup's in Bishop and you need them right now.
right. And then they're really far
Yeah,
apart.
they're really far apart. I fought a guy on the side of the highway one morning. Um, okay, a patrol shift for us, if everybody was there, was 7 deputies. If we were full staff and everybody was working, every time the schools let in and out, we had 15 deputies directing traffic at the schools.
Wow.
Um, I got in a fight with a guy on the side of a highway as all that was taking place, as morning time school traffic was taking place. It was a long time that we were by ourselves on the side of the road,
Hmm.
waiting for somebody else to get there. Thankfully, the guy made a mistake and gave me his back. and I slammed him against the side of my pickup truck and with my shoulder in the small of his back and knocked all the air right out of him. And then was able to take him down, and I sat on his head until backup got there.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, if it had been toe to toe for that amount of time, would I have had the stamina to stay with that? Would I, I don't know.
Right.
He screwed up and allowed me to get a dramatic upper hand on him. And that's what I
And,
think about. I was out there by myself for a long time.
yeah, and that's the reality of working in smaller places.
Hmm.
You don't necessarily have 10 people in your district ready to come with you.
Yeah.
We we had also in our county when I first started here 20 plus years ago. We did not have really any full time firefighters or
Hmm.
EMTs. So the first person that went to every fire call and every medical call on an overnight shift was, guess who?
Yeah.
So, the so you became fairly proficient at
Yeah.
trying to figure out what kind of resources you needed for things pretty quick, where you would
Yeah.
say, I can handle this, I can't handle this, I'm going to need all these extra people, start calling them. Being able to size up situations came pretty fast in a
Yeah.
in a place like that. So, you could be confronted with a lot of things by yourself in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I just decided what the cover photo for this episode will be. And it's going to be one of the bison from the traffic jam I got caught in your county. Because I have
Yes.
been to Seth's County, ladies and gentlemen.
The sight of the de-pantsing heard round the world. If you've seen a meme of a bison with a pair of pants on its horn, that is about 8 or 9 miles from where I'm sitting right now. So
Yeah.
good time.
Um,
Um, I have a bison on the cover of the book too. So
okay. Well, tell everybody about your book before we get out of here.
okay. One of my fellow instructors at the academy joked that I was like, the Jehovah's Witnesses or a door-to-door salesman. They'd be like,
Yeah.
have I told you about my book yet?"
Yeah.
So he's probably right. One of the things I did post retirement was I wrote a book. It's about police work, but it's funny, or at least I'm trying to be funny.
Yeah.
For many years, I wrote a column in the local paper, like a lot of small towns do, talking about police occurrences and the things that went on. And I had so much material that I was able to make a book out of some of the funniest things of it, along with just some other writing and things that I did. And published it myself, and I've been actually kind of happy with the response on it. Um,
There you go.
I I don't know if for people that actually watch this, we can actually see it. It's called very creatively the Custer County Sheriff's Log. So available on Amazon. Just search me or search the book. Um, the interesting thing, you were talking about regular Earth people or normal decent folks.
Mhm.
Uh, I have had quite a few normal decent folks tell me that they liked the book.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of that humanizing police, because a lot of times people's interactions with the police are basically like, cop gave me a ticket,
Mhm.
right? Um, you know, people have said that some of the things they've read in this book are surprising, and they don't know how we would put up with them, or they were surprised that some of these things actually happened. And true story, they all happened. You can't make some of these things up. So
This job is a crazy mix of absolute hilarity and heartbreak.
yes,
Just the hilarious things that you see and that you experienced out there doing this is as Cooper from Southland would say, is the front row seat to the greatest show on earth.
yes. I used to tell people that it's the best. It was the best job in the world and the worst job in the world,
Yeah.
and it could be all those things in the same shift.
Hmm.
You could make one of the best arrests you'd ever made in your life and get an absolute just guy who needed to be off the street, or you could have helped somebody who was really in a bad situation, and then
Hmm.
5 minutes later, you're at a death scene.
Yeah.
with grieving relatives and things. And
Mhm.
then you might be back to something else right after that that was really great. And yeah, I mean, it's an interesting roller coaster ride, and pretty much anywhere you're at, you can
Mhm.
experience that. So that was kind of what I tried to put into this book in a lot of ways, was just sort of
Yeah.
the ups and the downs and the interesting things that happened up here. Because and the region I live in has just some interesting places, some interesting people.
Mhm.
You don't have to be crazy or a little weird to live here, but it helps.
Yeah.
I grew up here, so that ought to tell you something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the book in a nutshell. I've got a second book that I'm working on in rough draft. I've been
Mhm.
doing some writing for Eric Gelhaus over at
Yeah.
AmericanCop.com. If you want to check, if nobody has checked out the new AmericanCop.com, they should. Eric's doing a really cool job with trying to put relevant and fun content on there. So
Mhm.
um, that's about it for writing right now.
Yeah, I would say your jurisdiction, as you say, the people that live there, like the actual full-time residents, you got to be a little different to be able to survive those winters and live there in that kind of isolated
You
lifestyle.
do, you
And
do. It's kind of a
yeah.
running gag with everyone that is from here about the guy who moves out from a big state or a big city somewhere,
Hmm.
usually California, but not
Hmm.
always. Who buys a house and says came out on vacation and says the Black Hills is beautiful, it's great, and then after a couple of winters, he's like, man, this place sucks. It's
Yeah.
dismal. It's terrible. Everything closes
Yeah.
down in the winter. I can't stand it. And
Just the
so
juxtaposition though of what your full-time residential population is, and then like
mhm.
your summertime touristy population.
Yes, I've been
Uh,
told that our county's population varies up to 40% between those two seasons.
yeah.
So we could have 40% less here in the
Hmm.
wintertime. So,
Yeah.
which does make police work interesting in the summer because
Hmm.
you have a place where they say you have a county with a quote unquote population of 10,000
Yeah.
by the census, which who knows,
Yeah.
right? Uh, the problem is it you between people driving through and people staying temporarily, you
Hmm.
could have triple or four times that much population during the day,
Yeah.
and they're all highly transient, and
Hmm.
people you've never met or dealt with before, and some
Yeah.
of them don't a lot of them don't even speak English.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting kind of a proposition.
Yeah. Um, Especially when you get that little event over in Sturgis.
Yes, the quaint motorcyclist rally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Circling back to the book for a second, one
Yeah.
of the sections in the book is a sort of a diary I kept of one year that I actually worked at the rally as a temporary officer for the county up
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
They bring on a lot of extra cops because
Yeah.
they can't handle it otherwise. So
Yeah.
there, there's probably 100 temporary cops working up there just for the bike rally week. And
Hmm.
if you're a cop, I mean, they take cops from all over the country for this.
Yeah.
If you're the police and you want an absolute police bucket list item, go work for Sturgis or Meade County for
Yeah.
rally one year, and just to say you did it. It's a lot of fun,
Oh, having worked 10 seasons of Southeastern Conference football games, I don't think I need to check that bucket off my list. I think my
right?
bucket's thoroughly checked on major crowd events. Um,
True story.
um,
This is probably a little different crowd considering that,
yeah.
there's a lot of people that are actually professionals with money that are kind of playing biker dress up for the week. That might be like
Hmm.
80% of your people. And then there's actual outlaw motorcycle gangs.
Yeah.
And you can presumptively assume that pretty much everyone is armed.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a rally thing. Um,
Uh, the very first invocation of the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act came out
yes,
of incident in Sturgis during Bike Week.
yeah, the shooting at the bar involving the Iron Pigs Club.
Hmm.
There's court precedent on that now too.
Yeah.
That did set some precedent. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's a pretty interesting mixture of folks. like I said, you have people that are kind of playing biker dress up for the week, and then you have people who really do live that life and
Yeah.
live the crime associated with it and other things like that. Um, and it's kind of a beacon for people that think they're going to party for a week or two without any real rules. And, there are rules.
Yeah.
They're just a little different for rally week sometimes. So,
Oh gosh. Because that first class, the one where you and I met, was the week after bike week.
right.
And I remember as we were driving out to the range, there's this open field over on one side of the road, and there was all these little, like, I don't even know if you can call them cabins. They were
Yeah.
just like a little, you open a door and lay down on the mattress and close the door behind you,
Yeah. They're like a
little
little garden shed
shelters.
or something. Yeah.
They can't, I don't know if you can call them cabins. They got to be called shelters at most. And like just rows of those. And I'm like, man, the stuff that's got to take place out there with a bunch of drunk people.
Yes. So, that particular campground that you have to drive through to get to their police range,
Hmm.
we went the week that I worked rally, we went to an ambulance call there where a lady broke her leg in a pole dancing accident. Um,
Hmm.
so, and that's not too unusual. They were having a pole dancing competition, and she slipped and fell and busted her leg. That's pretty
Yeah.
average, right? I mean, that's like a
Yeah.
normal thing that goes on there all the time during that week.
Yeah.
So, um, and as a cop, you're kind of, you're cynical, you're suspicious. You're like, is
Yeah.
that really what happened? Yeah, that is actually what happened. There were many witnesses.
One of the other differences, like right now, if I needed a cable for my computer, there's lots of places within 10 minutes of me that I can go get a cable.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
we got there and tried to hook uh, Tom Gibbons's computer into their projector system. And, well, the Smithsonian called wanting to know if we could steal the projector for him so we could put it in an exhibit. Uh,
Uh,
it's like, well, I guess we'll have to go to Best Buy and see, or somewhere, see if we can get a cable for this. Well, the closest Best Buy was an hour and a half from us.
yes.
It's like, how are we going to find the cables we need to make this system work so that we can show the videos for the class, the PowerPoint?
Yes, I mean, we're still one of the least populated states.
Hmm.
The place I'm sitting in right now, I like to joke with people that I've got to drive a, about 25 minutes if I want so much as a convenience store hot dog.
Hmm.
I mean, that kind of gives you some idea of how far out in the middle of nowhere I am. But, I mean, after a lifetime of doing law enforcement and stuff like that, I don't mind not interacting with a whole lot of people all the time.
Right.
That's you're, as they say, my peopling is all used up for the day, when you're done doing
Yeah.
that kind of work sometimes. So,
Yeah. Oh man. When I went out there for one of those classes, because we did start just one year, we did the follow up in Custer the next year, and
mhm,
I forget which trip it was. Uh, Dave Spalding was booked to do a class somewhere in South Dakota. And so I had two possible routes to get where I was going. I flew to Denver and drove up and visited some family in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and then came on up into South Dakota.
mhm,
And I had two routes that I could take to get to where we were teaching, and one of them went through that town that Spalding was booked to teach in. And so, well, I'll
mhm,
just drive through that and swing by the place. And I go through this little town. And it was funny. The train was blocking the tracks,
uh-huh,
and there was a sign that said, "If the train blocks the tracks for more than 1 hour, call the sheriff at this number."
right,
And finally, the train moves, and I'm able to go into town. I actually go to the little range, a little gun shop that's going to be its host. They had an indoor range there, but they were going to do the class at an outdoor range. And I'm looking around like, I don't know what hotel he's planning to stay at because I
mhm,
only see one, and it's a no, no. And I'm walking around this little town, and then I hear the train whistle blowing, and in the distance I can see it starting to move. I'm like, I better go right now so I can beat it to the other side of town. I took off, and I barely got out. And so I contacted Dave later. I said, "So where are you planning to stay?" And he said, "Oh, that hotel that's there in that town." Dave, I don't think so. I think I'd drive the 40 minutes from Custer or wherever it was. And, oh, it'll be fine. And like later, I get a message from him. I should have listened to you. It was like the Cowboy Inn or something like that.
Yes. And I know the town you're talking about. It's a very interesting place.
Yeah. What was the
Uh,
name of it? I can't remember.
almost sounds like Edgemont to me.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a
Yeah.
very interesting place.
Yeah.
Yeah. It actually got its not too far away from there is the remains of a huge U.S. Army ordnance depot from World War II
Okay.
and a whole bunch of buried bunkers and things that they used to
Okay.
store ordnance in the old days. And it was abandoned for years. And now it's been opened as a survival retreat where they will sell you a bunker for a 99 lease or year lease, and you can build it as your Armageddon bunker or whatever.
Okay.
So it's an interesting kind of a place.
Yeah.
You can do a couple Google searches on that place and find out about the shooting that they had down there last
All
year
right.
at that survival retreat that was later, I think, judged to be self defense. But
Okay.
it's an interesting place with interesting people. Let's put it that way.
There you go. There you go.
So
Well, Seth, I have no idea how long we have been recording,
no, me either.
uh, uh, but I know it is a quarter to 10 here in the right coast, and I'm getting ready to head to bed. So I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for bailing me out tonight. I should say I had another guest that was lined up that was going to be on tonight, and he emailed me this morning and said, "Hey, I misjudged my time, and I'm not going to be able to get home in time to do that tonight." So I threw in the show group. Yeah, my standard all too often of late Sunday night. All right, who can bail me out posts? And Seth was able to come in and bail me out. And as always, Seth, I have enjoyed the conversation.
Always glad to be on, Lee. Talk guns and training and stuff.
Yeah,
And yeah, when the famous dudes can't show up, I show up. So be one of my
yeah,
specialties in retirement here. So
that's right. There you go. There you go. I always enjoyed the conversation.
all
I
right.
hope the audience likes this and sticks with it, but I had fun whether or not they do. This is, hopefully they will. All right. And for the audience, we know that your most important asset is your time. And thank you for choosing to spend it with us.